The Four Absolutes of the Oxford Group. Absolute Purity, Part 2. My name is Steve Van Eiderstein. Welcome to the Narrowing Path, Walking the Spiritual Walk. I'm excited to get into the second part of the second absolute purity from the Oxford Group. Last week, there's so much good stuff that came last week, and I appreciated all the comments and the input, and someone mentioned something about the idolatry and idolizing things, and sex being one of them. And it was just so much good information came out of it. So I'm excited to get into this second half with you today and really dig in. So we're going to start where I read halfway through, and where I decided to split was right in the middle of the sex portion, where it kind of shifted gears, was it was still focusing on that. And so it's going to be a little bit of a continuance of that theme at the beginning of the reading. But we go into a lot of good stuff afterwards, or I should say more good stuff afterwards too. So I will be reading out of this first edition of the book, What is the Oxford Group here? And I guess let's just get right to it. All right. So here we go. This is the second half of the chapter, Absolute Purity, about the four absolutes from What is the Oxford Group. In the education of the young, sex is still a bone of contention. Many elders still believe the young can be brought up as better Christians if they are spoon-fed on fairy stories about their origin. They would rather let their children, as they grow to adolescence, invent ghastly mental pictures or develop a horror of sex as something unclean, than put sex on a normal basis for instruction when the young mind is in a receptive condition to be put wise to natural instincts and methods of propagation. Those parents and teachers who are incapable of or shudder at the thought of enlightening a young mind which needs at an opportune moment in its life a simple, helpful explanation of sex are suffering from a shame which has its roots deep in impurity. To the pure, all things are pure, and the minds of the normal young receive sex instruction helpfully given by one they respect, with the purity and reverence that is its natural light. With certain sets of people who call themselves intellectuals, impurity has become the fashion. A number of these intellectuals are really mental slobs with minds that, of little use to anyone, are filled with colossal impertinence. Writers of a certain class of fiction decry all forms of decency and purity, gulling by their sheer audacity the reading public into the belief that if they put expressions and words that are not usually used in decent society into print, it is a sign of genius. Writers who have been given by God talents beyond the ordinary descend into depths of filth in their work that would make the average hard swearing but honest man disgusted. Even if literary critics condemn a pornographic book for its blatant indecency, the sales do not suffer. Publicity of any kind is an advertisement, and there is an enormous number of people who will rush to buy a book which has been condemned for its indecency, or, should work be banned from public sale, offer large sums for copies that may be purchased through private channels. Beauty of words and great writing are not dead, but it will need a literary world thoroughly changed to Christ to rid us of the pernicious influence of a minority of authors who would sell their souls to the devil. The theater and cinema are easy prey to those who would commercialize indecencies. Censors and police are vigilant in most countries to stamp out moral degeneracy in entertainments, but the appetite of the prurient minority demands indecencies, immodesties, and easy virtue in entertainments, and is willing to pay for them, so those who cater for this class of entertainment goers use every device and subterfuge to give them what they want. Much that is not only against good taste, but frankly harmfully obscene, gets past the guardians of the morals of the entertainment public. Where there's a will, there's a way, is proved constantly in the business, and films and plays are often produced publicly and make the public wonder whether any kind of censorship exists at all. That pictorial art must shock to attract attention is the belief of some of those who have an artistic capacity. Modern art galleries and exhibitions exude suggestive nudity from their walls. Grossness is mistaken for artistry, blatancy for originality, indecency for truth, until the average person often wonders if these artists are half-wits who have never grown beyond the silly crudity of their childish sex obsession. In this modern world, it is believed to be impossible for anyone who lives actively to lead anything approaching a virtuous life. How can one have untainted motives in the business world, for instance, when one has to compete with the lying misrepresentation of one's competitors who will stick at nothing to ruin one? How can one think modestly when literature, films, plays, and art rely on impurity to tickle the palate of a jaded public? How can one behave with purity when one is surrounded by people who find impurity of action the incentive to forgetfulness that we are not on earth forever and live today, for tomorrow we may be dead, a drug that deadens them to sensitiveness and remorse? What shame is there in incontinence when pseudoscientific writers tell us to allow our instincts full scope if we wish, because that is being natural. And being natural is the best way to be happy. The only person who can answer these questions is Christ. He cannot answer them for us unless we really want to know and will listen to what he tells us. How can many people believe that though the world breeds impurity, God can take it away? If we believe God can meet every temptation, we must believe that God can keep us pure. He has never allowed a soul to suffer for resisting a temptation, although materially it may seem as if the result of that resistance may have been a distinct loss to us. And lead us not into temptation means take away from us the burden of temptation that appears too great for our human nature to resist. How many of us realize that the Holy Spirit can enter and sanctify a mind, sweeping its darkest corners, opening spiritual windows that human means cannot move, letting in the cleansing sunlight, bathing the spiritual room that is within us all in the serenity of real purity. Feeding the mind on impurities is like feeding the body on tainted food. Because we know the consequences to the body of such foolishness, we would not eat tainted food. Why then do we feed the mind on impure food that must slowly but surely kill the soul? Kill it, because the Holy Spirit has been destroyed within us. We say bitterly, kill it until, because the Holy Spirit has been destroyed within us, until we say bitterly that there is no God. Let me reread that last sentence one more time. Kill it until, because the Holy Spirit has been destroyed within us, we say bitterly that there is no God. I don't know about you, there's a lot of heaviness in that one too. A lot of truth and a lot of similar problems. It's kind of just amazing to me. The more I read about these, or read the spiritual literature from the turn of the 1800s or turn of the 1900s, right, to the late 1800s, early 1900s, 1910, 1920s. Like the same problems were going on then. This was what we're facing today is nothing new. Honestly, it's gotten worse. I think it's been something that's progressed. It's been something that has become a major problem, if I'm frank. And we need to really address it. It needs to be brought to the surface, and it needs to be talked about, and a new direction be taken, because it seems as though they were trying to warn us years ago that, hey, this needs to be, this will, it seems like there were some clear warning signs, and then there was progress being made, and then there was a shift, and we kind of took some steps back maybe, or we just stopped progressing in this spiritual aspect of living. And it's really interesting for me to actually just read this and read the depth at which they go into and the things they refer to. And maybe it's just a generational problem. I don't know. But it seems as though we have the same issues, only they've gotten worse. So these are a lot of hot topics for today. These are a lot of things that are in the news today, in the political landscape. Communities talk about them. They're in the educational system. They're in the media today, whether it's social media, movies, TV shows, right? Like all the same stuff that we talked about today, or we talked about in this reading, is stuff that we talk about today that's a problem. And it's always that constant battle, it seems, between morality and obscenity. Which is a very interesting perspective to look at this through, and the lens to take. So, well, we start right off, though, with, at least in the Western world, something that's become very common to many people to have a conversation about, and it's sex in the education system. And there's a lot of opinions on this. There's a lot of disagreement. There's a lot of polarizing opinions. There's a lot of things that people believe is right and believe is wrong. And they address this issue of sex and public schools, or just teaching children in a healthy way about sex. It's kind of interesting how they address it here. I feel like what they stated here is the line that people are trying to walk, because many people think we've gone too far the other way with this sex education stuff, and we've put it's overemphasized in a lot of ways. And what's the appropriate thing to do? Where's the appropriate line? Where's the appropriate actions to be taken? And there's too early, and then there's too late too, right? A lot of people are concerned about it being brought into a child's education too early. There's people that avoid it completely too. And I don't think either one of those are healthy, right? The healthy line's in the middle somewhere, and to have an appropriate conversation about it, right? So, and those that can't have the conversation, that's a problem. Those parents and teachers who are incapable or shudder at the thought of enlightening a young mind which needs, at an appropriate moment in life, that's a key phrase here, appropriate moment in life, a simple, helpful explanation of sex, are suffering from a shame that has its roots deep in impurity. So first of all, they're acknowledging, like, this is something that children at an appropriate age need instruction on, need awareness of, need education on, right? Because if you don't, then if you're not able to have that conversation, and we're talking about from the person providing the information, if teachers and parents, I also like that they put out teachers and parents in that too. If you can't have that conversation, there's a problem with you, right? If you're too ashamed to talk about it with your child, and it's an appropriate time, and it's something that there needs to be instruction and direction on, because it's not like it can be avoided. You can't just ignore it. If you can't have that conversation, you have to take a look at yourself, right? If I was in the position where I needed to have a conversation with my child about sex and what's going on, and maturity and hormones and all this kind of stuff, because it's relevant, this affects their immediate living, right? It's a natural progression of things. If I can't have that conversation, I have to take a look at myself and wonder why. I have to see, why can't I actually have a healthy conversation about this? There's a lot of people out there that can't have a healthy conversation about it. They want to ignore it. It makes them uncomfortable. And I don't think that's a right place to be either. There's the over indoctrination. There's the unboundaried discussion about it in inappropriate ways, in inappropriate times, right? There's that side, but there's also the shameful presentation or the shameful avoidance of a conversation, which gives it this unhealthy perspective. It makes it seem like it's something dirty. It goes into to the pure, all things are pure, and the minds of the normal young receive sex instruction helpfully given by one they respect. So someone that they believe cares about them, someone that they believe has their best interest in mind, someone they believe is knowledgeable in general, right? With purity and reverence, that is its natural light. So we need to be putting this on and giving it the respect that it's due. It's really the adult's responsibility to, at the appropriate time, I want to make sure I emphasize that every single time, provide healthy, accurate, and how did they phrase it? And it's and in a natural light as to what sex is and the nature of sex. And it's really our responsibility to do that. And we have to give it the respect it deserves, because it becomes this corrupting and corroding thread that can really derail people, derail children, right? Because if it's not presented appropriately, it becomes this dirty, impure thing that kids can become ashamed of, right? But if it's not presented appropriately, also, it can become an idol that's worshiped. People worship the idea of sexuality. People worship the idea of gender. People worship the idea of this side of their life, and becomes a defining characteristic for them. Now, neither are okay. Neither are healthy. It should not be your idol, but you should not feel ashamed and impure because you are a human being and you have these, and you're just developing in a natural course of life, right? It's something that really needs to be acknowledged, discussed, and a healthier determination be made. And I am happy that they brought in parents and teachers, because there's a discussion whether this should even be in schools or if it should be done at home, right? And a lot of people, I think, wanted it to be in schools purely because they can't have a healthy conversation about it at home. A lot of parents, I think, shy away from actually having a healthy conversation about sex with their children. And so they leave it up to the schools, and then they get angry or upset when the schools are not doing it the way they want it done. So it's something that parents, I believe, need to be really consider taking back, not leaving it just on the school to provide that education, right? Because they will, and they'll get, whether it's from their friend group, whether it's from the curriculum itself, wherever it's coming from, like, it will be taught. So if it's not something that you are comfortable with, or you want to have what you would consider a healthy conversation about it, then I suggest that responsibility goes back into the home. I think schools have been given too much on their shoulders for the actual moral rearing of children. It should be a place to practice it, mostly, not just learned. And it needs to be brought from the homes, I believe. It seems to be how it's worked well in the past. And we might be losing a little bit of that today. And so to having a healthy, appropriate conversation with your children regarding this is something a lot of people need to take a look at and decide what that means for them. So next, we moved on to the intellectuals, and I really loved that. The way he talked about it, there's so much arrogance, there's so much pride that gets wrapped up into the category of being an intellectual and your worshiping of your own mind and your own capabilities of thought. And it's, I love the way he talks about it here, because, and just for just awareness and clarity, I had to look up impertinence just to make sure I had a right definition, and it's irrelevant or things of no value. Is what the dictionary told me from the 1929 dictionary I've got over here. So, so remember, impertinence, irrelevant or things of no value. So a number of these intellectuals are really mental snobs with the minds that of little use to anyone are filled with colossal impertinence. So it's like this full of hot air. That's what that people say, common phrase, right? These just, you got a ton of nonsense information that doesn't really help anybody. It's having a sense of arrogance about them that's really just a ego fulfilling presentation. And the dissemination of knowledge to share or to just purely show that they know something that really doesn't build anybody up. It has no productive value. It's just this presentation of information for their own selfish gratification. So, and they don't use their intellectual gifts to actually pursue things that are pure and healthy, right? Because this, I'll talk a lot about a little bit at the end, but if you don't have these gifts focused in some way, right, they're going to get misdirected into unhealthy things like impure thoughts, insecure concepts, and self-serving ideas, right? It's going to take these gifts that these intellectual people have, and they're going to be rerouted into things that just make them feel good, that give them money, that give them a sense of popularity, right? And that serves nobody but themselves, right? If you're given these gifts and these abilities to comprehend complex things, right? Or a scientific mind, or just a depth of and use of language, which escapes most, right? Then use it to help move people forward. Use it to help grow this world. Use it to help explore purity and dignity and morality, and not just to use it to, how did they say it? He talked about, or whoever wrote this talked about how it was they were trying to get the moniker of genius, right? Like, I say these things, and because I say them, I must be a genius, right? Because they're shocking, they're abrasive, and they use that as a mark of genius, right? When they can actually use it, and it's really just boosting their own ego again, right? It's really just this way they can feel superior to other people and to stand on a soapbox of condemnation. And it does no one any good. It just makes them feel better about themselves. Just like any other sin or moral failing too. I do want to make sure this is just another version of it, right? And we all have our own, but this one, yeah, this is just one that's used to shock and awe, to serve their own ego, to grow their own popularity, to get them more money, whatever it might be. Really, it's only a push for fame and financial gain at the end of the day. And all these obscure things that they talk about are really just irrelevant things of no value, impertinent. So it's sacrificing their integrity, their morality, their integrity of their character for pleasure and selfish gratification. And this isn't just, when we talk about indecency, when we talk about obscenity or an obscurity, a lot of times it gets associated to a sexual motive, or gets associated to sex in general. And though that is included in what we're talking about, obscenity can be anything, really. We'll talk about it a little bit more because we move next into theater and art. But the things that can fall into this category are all forms of societal indecency, right? We're not just the one category of sex, but just anything that can be, well, in today's society, that used to be considered obscene. And that could be sex, drugs, alcohol. That could be certain ways people live, certain religious practices, like whatever it wants to be, or whatever pushes the envelope. People would just run right to the edge and jump off to be able to boost themselves up, right? To just under the guise of what? Art. And they do give a little bit of hope at the end of the paragraph about it, though, because the beauty of words and great writing is not dead, right? There's a lot of fantastic stuff out there. It's not all of it, but we will need a literary world thoroughly changed to Christ. So it needs a reorientation, right? These gifts and these talents and skills of all of these people that have these intellectual capabilities, specifically writing and being able to put words to paper so people can actually engage with ideas, needs a definite reorientation. It's still there, but it needs to be repurposed. And it's not everybody that's doing it. It also talks about how it's it's usually a minority, but the minority, a lot of times, even today, shapes the directive, pushes the envelope, and finds the justifications. And that was going on back then too. And it still happens today. And it happens slowly. And that's an important thing we need to consider, because we're going to go into the next thing we talked about is, theater and cinema. And how impurity really, and how purity is being removed. So, which inherently means impurity is taking place, because it's, or impurity is replacing it. It is taking its place, because that's the nature of this. If it's not a pure thought, if it's not a striving for purity, then it can only be impurity. That's the dichotomy of this. So to start this off, it says the theater and cinema are easy prey to those who would commercialize indecencies. And what a way to say that, commercialize indecencies. So to monetize them, to make them more widely accepted, to desensitize people to them, right? Like, this is something that has been progressive throughout movie history, right? So they're talking about impurity being taken and normalized through the use of media and different mediums, right? Whether it's theater, like actual people in plays, or movies, right? And think about that today. Compare today's movies with movies of the past, right? The production has obviously improved, right? Like the quality of the movie, objectively, but the content has drastically shifted, right? There's been these, it's been a ever expanding line as to what's acceptable in popular normalized culture and media, what people can get away with, really, what indecencies can be incorporated, what impurity can be incorporated. We're talking about shock and awe things. We're talking about sex and nudity. We're talking about drug use, gore, fear, all sorts of things that used to be at one point obscure or obscene, or things that were just not accepted in movies, right? And little by little, people have become desensitized to it because it's been added little by little by little, because those are the things that keep people in seats. Those are the things that make people money, that keep people that provides substance for the financial motivation for people to continue to make these movies, right? The substance of movies has lost. A lot of things have been put into movies under the flag of artistic expression. And I understand that. That's really important. Free speech, all of that, very important stuff. But where's the actual moral barometer of what's healthy and what's not healthy? What should be incorporated into something and not incorporated into something? I don't believe it's really the government's job to be censoring, but well, no, I don't believe it's the government's job to be censoring. I believe that should come from the people that are producing, right? And that should be a gauge from the people that are consuming as well. So we're kind of losing the whole game here. We're losing the whole ball here, right? And then people demand government step in and take these responsibilities on themselves. And it leads to a mess, because that's not really the government's function at that point. So it's been something that, what blows my mind is, if we thought about it, there's 100 years ago. This was 100 years ago that this was written. They were taking things that were problems 100 years ago and putting them in this book. And guess what? We have the same thing. And the progression that they were expecting to happen has happened, at least in this area. In this area of purity, if they had written down their fears of what was going to happen, I think we'd be right on the mark for it coming true. If not, it has, so we really have to consider so much about this. Like, why are we consuming things? Why are we producing the things we do? Like, this extends to like the content of the movies. Like, what's the message of most of the movies we get? Like, I know there's movies just for entertainment, but usually there's some moral, some principle that goes along with these things. And there's standards that there used to be standards that had to be normalized or to meet a certain level of acceptability. And now it's just what shocks me the most, what stimulates me the most, what the more flashes and noise and bigger and louder and better, and like the actual content and moral message of the movies seem to be less and less and less and less, which is, you have to ask the question, is society, I guess it's a cyclical thing. One feeds the other. But is society dictating where the movies go, or do the movies dictate where society goes? That's the question I was wondering about right there. The movies are a reflection of society, and society continues to allow the movie industry to push the boundaries to make them feel something. The desensitization of society is overwhelming. What's now acceptable? There's there's no lines anymore. At least the lines are pretty far out. And maybe that's a better way to say it. There are boundaries to this, but it seems as though there's been a lot that's been thrown in that has really had an impact on the direction we take things. So in this, he directly, the author directly connects it to the artistic world as well, and how, in their opinion, and to be honest, I'm not an admirer of fine art today, but what I do know, a lot of it it's much different than it used to be, to say the least. There's been a lot of that shock and awe and extremism that's been incorporated into the art world too. And they knew this was probably going to happen because it was happening back then. This is a great quote from them. Grossness is mistaken for artistry, blatancy for originality, indecency for truth, until the average person often wonders if the artists are half-wits who have never grown beyond the silly crudity of their own childish sex obsessions. Like, it seems like there's a lot of art that's produced today that is based around sexuality and sex, and it just seems to be more a presentation for their own selfish gratifications rather than actual progress or displays of beauty or feats of impressive talent. There's a lot out there that is as well. This is the stuff that gets the most attention, though, seems to be the stuff that is the most unnerving or the most obscene and obscure. And that gets rewarded. And it's been getting rewarded. It's pretty clear what their opinion was on this. They were saying this type of immaturity, right? Like this, people have had a sex obsession for a very long time. And it's been infiltrating the art world and now the cinema world and literally every other aspect of life. And it's led to this derailment of healthy progress, it seems like, in a lot of the world today. And that's the last area he really digs into for this absolute purity chapter. And we go into kind of a wrap up. And I want to just read a quote directly from the book. If you got a copy of the book, it's page 92 I'm going to be looking at. And it says, in this modern world, it is believed to be impossible for anyone who lives actively to lead anything approaching a virtuous life. How can one have untainted motives in the business world, for instance, when one has to compete with lying misrepresentation of one's competitors who will stick at nothing to ruin one? How can one think modestly when literature, films, plays, and art rely on impurity to tickle the palate of a jaded public? How can one behave with purity when one is surrounded by people who find impurity of action the incentive to forgetfulness, that we are not on earth forever and live today, for tomorrow we may be dead, a drug that deadens them to the sensitiveness and remorse? What shame is there in incontinence when pseudoscientific writers tell us to allow our instincts full scope if we wish, because that is being natural, and that being natural is the best way to be happy. So I'm glad they put that paragraph in there. They're saying, we get it. Many, many people are saying this. How can we be virtuous? How can we practice purity when all around us, literally, we're swimming in impurity, and the impurity is what is progressing, not the purity, right? How do we hold ourselves to this moral character? How do we hold ourselves to these temptations? And I just love that quote. Live today, for tomorrow we may be dead. Does that sound familiar to anyone else in my generation, especially if you're 30s? That YOLO, you only live once. That was the first iteration of it right there. Live today, for tomorrow we may be dead. Turned into you only live once, or YOLO. Like, it's insane. Like, we have direct reflections of this in today's modern society 100 years later. And it just cracks me up when I hear this. These are the exact same problems today. They have just progressed even further, right? And the problem with this selfish living is that the remorse and sensitiveness, right, and is removed because they're like, well, I only live once. I get every right to do it, right? No, that's not the guiding factor. That just changes it. That just gives you the freedom to be completely selfish, self-centered, and self-serving at the expense of everyone else around you and everything else around you, because, hey, I only live once. I better just go do it and just do whatever it is I want to do, to the detriment of whoever. They were having this problem back then. We're still having this problem today. We haven't worked it out yet, I guess. And it just seems to be worse. And then the last sentence in that about embracing our natural tendencies, because this is a path to authenticity. I don't know about you, but when I've pursued anything that my flesh has desired, it hasn't turned out well for me, right? When I pursued a life of pleasure to happiness, right? And distraction to happiness, right? And all of these things just to make me feel better and serve my ego as a path to happiness failed me. They fail everybody that tries them. And I think that is an inclusive everybody, to be honest with you. I don't think there's one person that has lived that way, a selfish and self-centered way to be of service to their flesh only, right? And their natural proclivities, right? And natural animal nature really is what it is, that has founded the most true and pure sense of happiness and joy and contentment in their life, because that doesn't get you there. That doesn't actually provide what it's said to provide you, right? But it's just so many people struggle with these questions today. So many people with how can I hold this standard, right? How can I hold to this standard when this entire world around me is asking me to not, or is telling me I shouldn't, or is putting so much impurity in my path? How am I supposed to avoid it? How am I supposed to be successful? These are very heavy questions. These are very important questions, and they provide direction on this. The answer is living a spiritual life. The answer is to live a life in service to a higher power, to a God of our understanding. In this, they mentioned Christ in that last paragraph. Because this is from a Christian influence, and I know not everyone that listens to this follows a Christian path today, but they're talking about serving God. We need to take ourselves out of the middle. We need to pray, meditate, be of service. We need to not make this life solely about serving ourselves and our own self-interest. We have to actually put ourselves in service to something else. And then guess what? Have some faith that power and that way of life will actually provide you with the strength to resist these, with the strength to hold the moral line, with the strength to actually continue to grow in knowledge and understanding, with the strength to continue to live a life of integrity and righteousness. And when you do that, your life will change. It's a completely different way of being. So I'm going to read the last lines from this, because I think it's really important to contemplate this here at the end. They said, feeding the mind on impurities is like feeding the body on tainted food. Because we know the consequences to the body of such foolishness, we would not eat tainted food. Why then do we feed the mind on impure food that must slowly but surely kill the soul? It's this soul rot, this soul sickness. Slowly but surely kill the soul. Kill it until, because the Holy Spirit has been destroyed within us, we say bitterly that there is no God. Now, that is where I came to with my selfish and self-serving lifestyle. I came to a point where I was embittered towards God. There could not be one. There could not be anything greater than myself. There could be no higher power. There could be no God of my understanding, no energy, no source. It was a pointless life. And I was always going to feel horrible. I was always going to be a miserable person. This is just how I was, right? Now, I bring this up because a lot of this pursuit of perfection is about I used the wrong word. This pursuit of purity, a lot of people think is about perfection. It's not about perfection, right? We strive for purity. We strive for moral thoughts. We strive for a God or Christ-like character, for righteousness, right? We strive for those things, because when we don't, we lack direction, and we start to just serve ourselves in our own selfish ways and selfish considerations, and just trying to make ourselves endure this world until we die. This is not the way we're intended to live. I know for myself, I am just a human being, so I have not done this flawlessly, but the pursuit of purifying my heart, my mind, my actions has led me into a lot of places I never thought I'd get. It's led me into a joy, a peace, and a contentment and a freedom in my life that was beyond even comprehension at one point. I thought it was not even on the table for a guy like me to have, but to be able to actually say, no, this is possible. But it was amazing to me. It's a miracle that this was possible for me. And I now know it was this concept and this principle of absolute purity that were my guideposts, that gave me direction, that gave me the ability to take steps towards a more contented and joyous living, and a type of life that I didn't know was one I wanted. I had that erosion of my relationship with God, and it said here, killed of spirit, right? Death of spirit, really. I didn't know it was even happening. I didn't know that was what I was attacking within myself. But sure enough, they knew. They had gone through this. Many people of our day and age have gone through this. So it's walking towards that God of your understanding, that higher power, that whether it's Christianity, whether it's source, whether it's energy, whether it's the universe, Mother Nature, some other Abrahamic religion, I don't care what it is, but embracing the practice and the principle of absolute purity in the pursuit of your God's will for your life is a really beautiful thing. And it has been an incredible journey for myself. So that's the end of absolute purity. Thank you all for joining me for this. We're going to go into the third absolute next week. The third absolute is absolute unselfishness. And I have a feeling it's going to be a good one. I'm excited to reread that and then have a couple conversations with you about it. So we'll be back again next week, and I'm looking forward to it. So thanks for all the support on YouTube and Spotify and all those good places, and Facebook, Instagram, X, even remember TikTok too, and anywhere you find me. I appreciate the participation and the feedback that I get from y'all. So thank you so much. So I will be back again next week with Absolute Unselfishness Part 1. So until next time, thanks.